Hello, my name's Ruth Holt, and I'm excited to be with you today for World Schema Therapy Day. My topic that I'll be talking about is when chemistry causes chaos. As couples therapists, we are thinking often in schema therapy about what is it that drew this couple together and what's the basis of their relationship, because for some of us we can be really bound by the schemas that kind of draw us together in a very intense way but actually may be causing a lot of distress. So as we take some time today, I want to encourage you to have a think about your relationship. If you're a therapist, how you formulate your couples. I'm a couples therapist working in Canberra, Australia. I'm an advanced schema therapist, supervisor, trainer, both in individuals and couples. And I'm here today to talk to you about chemistry. Let's just take a step back, though, as we get started. Schema therapy is all about needs. In fact, somebody once said it maybe should be called needs therapy because we're thinking all the time about core emotional needs and not just needs for us as couples or individuals, but actually what was it like for us growing up? When I was a little person, did I get my needs met? And we think about needs in five key areas. The first one is, of course, connection and stability. So when you're a little person, is there a stable other? Is there someone there to hold me when I'm distressed? Are they reliable? Do they see me? So that's a really core need. And of course, combined with that sense of growing in autonomy and confidence and independence. So developing a sense of identity, moving from dependence to independence, from helplessness into autonomy. That's another core need. And then, of course, all people need some limits at times to learn that I'm not just the center of the universe, that there are other people, and I might need to restrain myself at times for the sake of others, to develop empathy, to develop appropriate ways of managing myself in relationships. And a fourth core need is the need to express. So the need to um, have my own thoughts and opinions and feelings and needs, and that I'm encouraged to ask for that rather than silenced. And then lastly, a need that sometimes we take for granted, but if you've had a lot of deprivation in your life, you will know it's not to be taken for granted. And that is fun and spontaneity. To be able to play, to not have to look over your shoulder and see if it's safe or if somebody is going to hurt you, but to be able to explore and be spontaneous. And in schema therapy, we say that when those needs are met, great things happen. We develop beautiful, healthy templates, and often we can go on to develop those healthy relationships and meet our needs as adults. But when those needs are not met in a chronic way, we go and on to develop schemas. And so schemas really are, I guess, just an arrow that point us towards our unmet needs. And I've listed the schemas there on the screen for you to see that some of the schemas that might develop when some of those needs aren't met. And you can see that first group of schemas are really core, powerful, painful schemas, aren't they? If I have a sense of unsafety, that people aren't going to be there for me, I'm never going to get seen, or there's just something really wrong with me. Maybe that's why my parents were not able to give me that love, because maybe I'm not lovable, or I'm chronically on my own, I'm chronically different to others. So those five schemas are very powerful, very big schemas, and they come when those needs for connection and safety and stability aren't met. And you can see in the outline I've got there too some other schemas that I'm going to refer to potentially later on today. But basically, when our needs are not met, we develop schemas, and when that schema can get activated, it's sort of like an emotional button that goes off inside of us. Because in that moment, I will think certain things, I will feel a certain way, my body will hold a lot of that distress perhaps, and there'll be memories or experiences growing up that are connected. Now, we may not be consciously aware of all of those things all at once, but say you've got an abandonment schema where you've had some people leave suddenly, perhaps a parent die, perhaps somebody who came in and out of your life, and you just never knew when they were going to be there for you. So if you have an abandonment schema, you will be thinking when it gets activated, no one's there. I'm on my own. You'll have some really big feelings of distress, um, Overwhelm, I think of it like being a 2 year old lost in a shopping centre. It's a very scary experience, and your body will activate, as well as there may be specific memories that are tied to that. Now, we're not always aware of all elements of our schemas, but that would be an example of when that abandonment button is pressed, all of that happens even at a subconscious level. Or perhaps you have a pretty common schema, which is called unrelenting standards. So, where you have been taught that you have to push, you have to try, you have to put pressure on yourself, you have to keep pushing through to get good marks, to achieve. And, there's a healthiness in that. But in unrelenting standards, by the name, you can hear it's unrelenting. There's this unrelenting pressure. So, I'll have those thoughts. I might feel kind of tight in my jaw or tension across my shoulders. I might have some significant memories where I was taught that, and it kind of worked for me. Maybe I really felt like it got me through, to get my career that I've got, or got through study. So that button can get pressed, and when it gets pressed, I might not have a capacity to pause and stop. So schemas, when they get activated, have a whole constellation of activations inside of us. And unfortunately, one of the painful things about schemas is they can be self perpetuating. So, let me give you an example thinking about the abandonment schema that I've just mentioned. So, I will have this belief no one really is ever going to be there for me. And perhaps I'm out dating and connecting with people. And even if I find a reliable partner, it just won't feel like they're really there. Like, even if they are predictable, something in my system might actually just not allow that to enter in and to make me feel safe. Or maybe I'm dating and I am highly attracted to people who are really unstable, unreliable. I'm kind of just drawn to them like a magnet. And I, even though I might know some more stable people who maybe are potential partners, they're kind of boring. They don't really activate me in the same way. So I might find myself in a situation where I'm kind of keeping on being drawn to someone who isn't a stable other for me. And I might even also avoid relying on them, right? I might kind of hide that part of me away, and just, keep things on the surface just in case they don't stick around. Or maybe I'll kind of get the opposite kind of approach. I might cling on for dear life. In Australia, we have koalas and they're very clingy creatures. So I might kind of cling on to my partner in a way that's sort of smothering, because this little part of me that has learnt people are unreliable feels so focused on keeping the relationship. And so if I'm doing some of those behaviors or flipping between those behaviors, then I'm going to end up kind of recreating the schema. I might drive a partner away, maybe a healthy partner who is reliable, just thinks it's never enough and leaves. Or maybe I kind of have a cycle of partners who are not there for me. And so you can see that it's a really painful experience, thinking about something like an abandonment schema or any of the schemas that can get perpetuated like that. So Jeff Young, one of the key authors in Schema Therapy, he defines schema chemistry, a kind of way of talking about this, right? He says schema chemistry refers to the tendency to be most attracted. So at our 9 out of 10 level, most attracted to partners who trigger a core schema. So you can see there that, that just magnetic kind of high attraction. It can often feel like obsessive falling in love, very fast kind of connection to someone, that just can feel magical, can feel amazing. People have said to me, we just knew from the moment we met. And sometimes people just know in a healthy way, and sometimes it can be a schema chemistry activation. So, when we're thinking about that, one of the things that this helps us with is starting to see where problems might be developing in couples. Because, as I've outlined, when people have those childhood environments where there are unmet needs, maybe they're feeling really unsafe in their house. Maybe, and it wasn't a place where you could really rely on anyone. So they might develop a mistrust abuse schema, perhaps, and an abandonment, so both of those. Then they may then be drawn to unsafe relationships, and partners are not reliable. And they might come to therapy and say, why do we keep getting stuck? Why is this not working? And so we want to, as therapists, start to go, well, what was the foundation of this relationship? Was there some schema chemistry there? In which case, we're going to have to notice that, unpack that, do some work on that, and help people get out of that schema chemistry. Or maybe someone's grown up in a house where they didn't have a caregiver who could really see them, who could really notice them, and maybe give them all that kind of attunement that they need. Well, they won't go on to develop an emotional deprivation schema. So again, we might be looking at a pattern in a dynamic where there's a real mismatch, where somebody's longing to be seen and they've got a partner who doesn't see them, maybe isn't very emotionally attuned, maybe is not particularly good at kind of those deeper emotional connections. So again, there's that schema chemistry playing out. Or the last example I wanted to give you here was perhaps somebody, and you might be one of these people who's grown up in a really critical culture where you've got to excel, you've got to do very well, not just maybe an unrelenting standard schema, like I've already mentioned, but maybe I just never did excel. I was always being criticized. I was always seen as the family failure, the one who didn't kind of make the grade. So if I've got those kind of schemas, I may be actually in a relationship where I've got a really critical partner, where the couple culture, maybe we've both got some of those sort of schemas going on, where we're very focused on what's wrong with each other, what's wrong with the other person, and not very good at affirming or encouraging the things we know help couples. So again, I kind of just want to point out that there's these unmet needs in childhood, creating schemas that then can flow out into how the couple dynamic plays out, which then reinforce the schema. Now, I want to be really careful that we are not saying that somebody who's been victimized, who's been abused in a relationship, treated badly in a relationship, we're not saying that is their responsibility. The person who is doing the abuse needs to take responsibility for that. So we're certainly not wanting to attribute responsibility, but we are trying to help people have a lens to start to notice the patterns that they may be in, where they may be drawn to a person, and those healthy alarm bells that maybe could be going off aren't going off because, as someone said to me, it felt like home. And if it feels like home, our neuroception, our body based response, doesn't kick off those alarm bells we'd like them to have. So in schema therapy, we really want to help people develop those healthy alarm bells and start to improve their relationships. So why does this happen? Why do we do this to ourselves? It doesn't make sense, does it? And yet, we know from huge amounts of attachment literature that that kind of bond that you develop with a key attachment figure early on, it's kind of like a glue, right? The love glue, the kind of way you are seen and held and loved, forms a template that then goes beyond that early childhood bond into adult relationships. So often, as we've been saying, we can be having, if we've got harsh, critical, rejecting parents, the glue is actually kind of fearful, anxious, defective glue. Like, I've kind of got to keep you happy. I've got to keep you on side. I never know when I'm going to get criticized. So that might be the pattern, the template that I've learned. Or ideally, nurturing, safe, kind of autonomy promoting parenting gives people a stable, healthy connection glue. But many of the people that schema therapy is designed to help have had the opposite of that experience. And schema therapy provides a really powerful way of helping go back in time, do work on that attachment bond, really in the therapy relationship, build a different type of therapy of attachment bond that then can translate out into the real world. And so that's some of the things that we're trying to do in schema therapy. So what I thought I'd do for this last part of the presentation is talk you through some of the common schema mismatches and what we might practically do in schema therapy, in couple schema therapy, to help couples. So I've given you three examples here. So one of them is emotional deprivation. So we've already talked about that schema, that sense I won't ever be seen. I'm kind of constantly going to be emotionally hungry. if you've got someone in the relationship with that schema, they can be highly attracted to an emotionally inhibited partner who kind of doesn't really think about emotions, doesn't like emotions, has been taught emotions are bad or wrong, or just kind of feels uncomfortable being emotionally close. So you could see how that would be a schema chemistry mismatch, wouldn't it? There'd be a real kind of battle because the partner who wants to be seen will often keep reaching out, asking, requesting in 1,000 ways. And if this is you in your partnership, you may be very familiar with this idea that I keep asking and I keep trying and I keep suggesting. And my partner kind of just looks away, just blocks, doesn't know what I'm talking about, thinks it's silly, says, I don't do that. And then often the partner who has the emotional inhibition schema can feel like, I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is, it's bad because whenever we talk about it, you get angry, you get upset, you start crying, and the emotional inhibition schema gets activated. And I think, I don't want that. So the more I don't want that, the more the emotionally deprived partner pursues, and then the more the emotionally inhibited partner distances. So you can see that that would be a really kind of common schema chemistry. Another one is where, again, I've talked briefly about that idea of if you feel like I'm just so broken, I'm defective somehow, I've kind of something wrong with me, I'm never matching up, maybe it's a failure schema where I've really just kind of always, below par, never good enough. So if you have one of those or both of those schemas and you're connected to someone who's got a really strong unrelenting standard schema, that person will be quite good at criticizing and telling you what's wrong with you and perhaps telling you what's wrong with us as a couple. So because there's this idea we've got to keep striving and pushing, and if I don't point out what your problems are, how are you ever going to get better? And then the person with the defectiveness schema just feels so crushed and hurt and overwhelmed by that criticism. And they may, counterattack, may kind of put all the blame on the other person because they don't want to face any of their challenges. Or maybe they just surrender into it and just feel like, yep, you're right. I don't even know why you married me. So you can see again, there's this really complex kind of mismatch between these two people. The last schema mismatch I wanted to talk about here is one that we're, in Western cultures, we sometimes have it as a bit of a gendered schema where you might have perhaps women with a self sacrifice or a subjugation schema. So they're both schemas that are about making sure the other is okay. I kind of put my needs lower down the rung because I've got to make sure you're okay. I've got to give in to you. I've got to keep you happy. Maybe you're going to yell at me or abandon me. So I just have to kind of, look after you in a way that kind of leaves me feeling resentful, frankly. So that set of schemas, right, self-sacrifice and subjugation, can be highly attracted to the other type of schema. So this is the entitlement schema, where the other person says, you know what, you're right. It is about me. I am the center of the universe, and I'm entitled to do what I want when I want it, and you are going to make it happen for me. And so you can see how there's this real kind of complementarity in a bad way of these schemas that people can get very stuck. And sometimes these schemas can exist in a couple relationship for quite a long time before anyone does anything about it. Perhaps it's not till the kids leave home. Or there's, perhaps somebody's doing some of their own individual work, on their self sacrifice or their subjugation, and they start to say, I think I would like a voice in this relationship. I'd like to put my own needs on the table. I'm not going to just kind of give in to whatever you want as if I don't matter. So they might start to try to tip the balance of the dynamic, which doesn't feel great if you have grown up in an environment where you didn't have limits, right? You didn't have a sense that we needed to have reciprocity. If maybe you were given everything, you were the special person, the golden child, the one that everybody looked after, and you didn't really learn how to do any of that looking after of other people. See, so as that kind of dynamic starts to shift, maybe across the lifespan, or maybe as a result of therapy, we start to see that this clash become really problematic. So there's some core schema clashes, and I will have some resources at the end of this presentation on what you might do to get out of those if you're starting to recognize yourself in one or more of those. That's a really important thing that you might want to try doing. One of the big questions that often people are sitting there with at this point is, how do we get out of this? What sort of help is available? Well, Schema Couples Therapy provides a really amazing opportunity to, first of all, start to notice what are some of these unmet needs sitting in the couple in front of us? What are those schemas that are in the room? Because those point us to those ways those needs weren't met. And, everybody has schemas. Nobody is special. We all have some schemas. So, one of the things we're doing early on is identifying those unmet needs and starting to kind of explore when you walked into this relationship, how able were you to know what those needs were and get those needs met? Or actually, was there a real schema chemistry dynamic going on there? We want to map out then how this plays out in a couple's dynamic. So often, when people have all these unmet needs, they'll have certain patterns of responding and ways of relating to each other. So, as I mentioned before, maybe there's an entitlement schema where I've got a top dog mode and what I say goes. I don't like to hear anything beyond beside that. Maybe I get angry. Maybe I've got a bully attack mode, a kind of side of me that pushes for my point of view because I'm not interested in other people's. Maybe that sort of other partner's got a compliant surrenderer mode, right? So we're starting to map out the modes and what goes on between the couple. As we do that, we then have a really beautiful formulation to help with change, right? So we're not just understanding it in an intellectual level, then we're starting to move into an experiential level. Because you remember, I said one of the key things about schemas is that they live in our bodies and they live in our memories. And so just knowing, just thinking about your schema is not enough often to change it. It often needs some corrective emotional experiences. And that, powerfully in couples work, it can happen with the couple, but also in the therapy room. We can create experiences that start to undo the power of those schemas, start to really bring healing and provide a kind of a contained place where couples can rehearse different ways of being. So, some of the key experiential things that we do in schema couples therapy is chair work. We might put that top dog mode or that bully attack mode on a chair and really explore it, not just in a critical way, but actually a curious way. Like, where has this been important for you? Maybe it was really important for you to always assert yourself because who was going to see you if you didn't? Or maybe that compliant surrenderer who really gives in and makes sure everyone's okay and then kind of gets angry at the end of it. That might have been really adaptive growing up. Maybe that was praised and encouraged, and you kind of learnt this is how I relate to everybody. Or maybe, if we're thinking about the abandonment schema, we might put that vulnerable side, in her own little chair or his chair, where we get to hear what it was like as a little person. So we're really making some space to start to hear from parts of self, from modes, parts of self that hold these schemas, and start to do some dialogues with them. And then we can also do imagery work, which again is a really amazing uh, corrective emotional experience. We go back to that history, back into the memories, and do some rescripting work. So, really starting to change the attachment system. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that we do as schema couples therapists that is unique. Really, no other therapy modality for couples does this work. And the opportunity as a therapist to invite, when it's safe, to invite the partner to go back into a memory, a difficult memory, and bring a corrective emotional experience. It's just amazing, very powerful, but needs to be done by skilled schema couples therapists. The other thing that we often do in schema couples therapy is connection dialogue. So, really start to talk to each other from a softer place, a gentler place, starting to kind of talk to that part that maybe hasn't been seen or hasn't been protected or hasn't been affirmed, all of those needs. So we start to build a capacity for couples to have these important conversations. And then lastly, we do definitely do behavior change. We, invite the partner's healthy adult, the part of the person who really has a capacity to be kind, empathic, assertive, and wise, come into that dynamic and start to restructure the interactions and interrupt that schema couples therapy, schema chemistry. So there's some of the ways, and you might be hearing more about those different techniques over today as we explore World Schema Therapy Day for couples, particularly. So we would love couples to have a schema healing relationship. That's our goal. We would love people to be in relationships where their partner meets those core emotional needs, where, say, someone with an abandonment schema actually has a stable, reliable partner who is there for them. And they can also let that in. Remember, he said earlier, sometimes abandonment schemas, they're tricky, right? You can have that person who's meeting that need, but the schema can kind of block it, can make it hard to feel it. So we would love for all of the people we're working with to have a relationship that is schema healing, not schema chemistry. I thought it might be useful just as we finish our time together, as I finish my time with you, to give you some takeaway practical exercises that might be helpful for you. So I want you to have a think about a schema. Maybe I've mentioned it already today. That is one of your schemas. Maybe it's an abandonment schema or a defectiveness schema or a entitlement schema or a self-sacrifice schema. What is the key message of that schema? I'd love you if you've got a pen or on your phone to write that down. When I'm really in the grip of this schema, what does it say to me? Does it say you've got to try harder and be better? You're always going to be alone? What is that message that that schema says to me? And then when it's activated, what do I do? Do I tend to kind of push my partner away? Do I criticize them? Do I kind of go into a lot of distress that they don't know what to do about? What do I do when I'm in the grip of this schema? Maybe I start making kind of biting comments and almost baiting them into a fight to kind of prove the schema. So, what do I do? And what would be the message I would need to hear? Like, if in the best world, if I could just wave a magic wand, what would my partner say in that moment to me? Would they say, I want to be right here with you, even though it's hard? Or there's nothing wrong with you? Or you matter. You really matter. I want to hear. Tell me more. Or if it's entitlement, you matter, but I also matter. So, what is the message that I need to hear in that moment? And what would be a healing action from my partner? So, for some people with, say, an abandonment schema, just having their partner stay and just sit and maybe hold their hand, even no words. That's a healing action. Or maybe having their partner kind of just ask 5 more questions before they jump in. So be really curious and kind of give some eye contact. What's a thing that my partner would say and would do that would be a healing action for me? And what would stop my partner doing it? Right? There might be some barriers for them. Maybe that's a conversation you could have. And then what would I need to let that in? What would I need to do? Maybe take a breath and remind myself in 2025, this person is safe. Or maybe they're not, and I need to have some protection. So, some questions for you to think about to take away with you from today's conversation. I've got more information about schema therapy training if you're a couples therapist and you want to learn about schema couples therapy. I've also got some resources for couples, including a workshop, a workbook that people can buy if they're doing some schema couples therapy, or some more information about those mismatches that I've already mentioned. So thanks everybody for listening. I'm Ruth Holt from Canberra, Australia. I'm very happy to be with you for World Schema Therapy Day.